Hi there, I'm Vladimir Latis. I'm from a company called AirDev. And what we at AirDev do is we build all kinds of portals on top of people's Salesforce. These are employee portals, customer portals, channel partner portals, freelancer portals, custom CPQ tools, and other things. And the one thing they have in common is that they plug into Salesforce using the Salesforce API, but they are external to Salesforce. And this approach is relatively unique, and it has some advantages and has some disadvantages. And we wanted to make a video to sort of showcase what are the right use cases when you may want to have an external portal, and what are the other use cases when you want to have the work done internally within Salesforce. We're approaching this from a pure cost perspective as to what is going to be cheaper in the short run and the long run for various kinds of scenarios. And so we're going to walk you through several different scenarios in this presentation. So how do we think about this question? There are really two main things to think about, which is the number of users that your tool, your system is going to have, and the level of customization that the system is going to have. Why are these important? The number of users is important because Salesforce pricing is driven by the number of users they have. They charge per user license fees. They also have some models where they charge you per session fees, but by far and large, they charge you per user. The level of customization is important because it determines how much upfront money you're going to spend. If your thing is pretty drastically different than what is natively available in Salesforce, then it's going to cost you a lot of money to customize because it's going to take somebody a lot of time. And so what we'll do is we kind of go through several different scenarios on spreadsheets and see how the math actually plays out. Okay, let's take a look at our spreadsheet that's meant to give you a comparison of the costs for systems built inside of Salesforce and ones built outside. So you can see there are three tabs. Each of the tabs represents a different scenario, a different product that's built, and each tab kind of shows you which option is better. The way that the model is set up is you have your inputs here on the left side in blue, and those are the numbers you change, and on the bottom here are your outputs. These are the costs over 1 year and over 5 years that you get for both scenarios. And on the right side, these are the actual calculations. Now, I'm not going to run through every number here, but the high-level drivers of the costs for inside of Salesforce, there are three. One is the initial development cost to build the product inside of Salesforce. So you can see that first section here. The second is the monthly maintenance cost. So how much does it cost to kind of update and upgrade the product on a continuous basis? And then the third are the additional license costs. How much more money do you have to pay to Salesforce to get the additional licenses needed? And then for the AirDev side, there are also three major cost drivers. One is the upfront implementation costs. Two are the monthly license costs. Now these are driven by the features and not by the number of users, so it's driven by how complex the application is. And then the third and an important one to think about are the API calls, because the portals that we build outside of Salesforce do connect through Salesforce through the API. And so what that means is they are making API calls to Salesforce. Salesforce gives you a certain number of API calls every day based on the plan that you have and the number of licenses that you have. And so if the number of API calls that you need to make every day exceeds the number of calls that they give you, you do have to purchase additional costs. And so we want to make sure to account for that in our calculation. So once again, there are three scenarios here. The first one is a low users, low customization scenario. So specifically, there's a SaaS company that wants to create a few custom dashboards that their existing Salesforce users would use. And if you look at the comparison here, building it outside of Salesforce is actually drastically more expensive than building it inside. Why is that? One, it doesn't require a lot of upfront development, and so you don't need to pay a Salesforce developer a whole bunch of money to build it. And two, it doesn't require any additional licenses, and so that number doesn't go up, where if you build it outside of Salesforce, it does require that monthly license fee, and that is much higher than having it inside of Salesforce. So this is a scenario of low user numbers and low customization where you wouldn't want to have an outside portal. The second scenario we have is a high number of users, low customization. So what does that mean? That means that you want to add a lot of people to your Salesforce, but you don't want them having to do a whole bunch of custom stuff. They're doing pretty standard things. So specifically, we have a scenario of a design company that uses freelancers, wants to create a portal which can be used by the outside designers to track their jobs and the tasks associated with those jobs. So a whole bunch of people, 2,000 people, that they want to be able to interact with their data, but in a pretty basic way. So if you skip down to the comparison, the outside Salesforce option ends up being cheaper. Why does it end up being cheaper? It ends up being cheaper because there is a pretty significant additional monthly license cost that is associated with having 2,000 users. And this is based on a per user Salesforce license and probably a community cloud Salesforce license. There are also per session licenses, so you may want to adjust these numbers accordingly if you're looking at that as a point of comparison. But based on this, you're looking at a 2x difference between having something inside and outside of Salesforce. The third scenario is the low number of users and high amount of customization scenario. So specifically, there's a financing company. They want to create a portal for their channel partners, where those partners can create projects, run your credit checks, generate proposals, and more. So a few people, as you can see, 35 people, but those people need to be able to do a whole bunch of stuff that isn't natively available in Salesforce without some custom development. And so the big drivers here, and you can see that this particular scenario works out to be more expensive inside of Salesforce, are the upfront development costs, and you can see that really difference in the first year, and that's because you're putting all of that money up front. So it's going to take a bunch of work to set it up in Salesforce, and so there's a big upfront development cost associated with it. And then there is an additional license cost that also affected. That license cost is pretty high, although there is a small number of users, because the type of a license that we predict that you would need in order to accomplish this type of functionality is a license that would be more expensive than the community license, which was showcased in the second scenario. So anyway, so these are the comparisons. They're really meant to show what are the cost drivers of this decision, of building something inside of Salesforce or connecting an outside portal and plugging in through the API. So in addition to our model, there are some other considerations that you may want to think about. So there are a few listed here. The first one is future user growth. What does that mean? That means that if you're expecting to, let's say you're that freelancing company and you have 2,000 users now, if you're expecting to grow and you're expecting to have 10,000 users a couple years from now, you kind of have to account for that license cost. And it doesn't scale the same way if you do it through the API. Second is a tailored experience. Because our portals are built in this custom way, you can basically have any sort of mobile, desktop, whatever experience that you want for your users. Continuous development and maintenance, our plans include constant development and maintenance. What that means is you get a certain number of hours a month, and you can reach out to us if you need us to add a new feature or change something or anything like that. Once you reach those hours, we would then charge you on a one-time basis for whatever it is you want us to do. And then time to market. We do move pretty fast, so we're usually able to spin one of these portals up in a matter of weeks. Cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the chat and weren't too bored by it. So thank you very much for listening. Please feel free to email me at vlad@airdev.co with any questions. And thanks again.